Today's shir is going to be in Hilchos Shabbos. We're going to learn Hilchos bishul b'Shabbos, Siman Shin Yud Ches. We're going to learn today Sif Daled regarding the sugya will be is your bishul. When do we say bishul achar bishul on Shabbos? Today's shir is going to be a shorter shir than regular, so therefore we will do more outside, less inside. We're going to try to cover more ground in a shorter period of time. So start with some backgrounds from the Beis Yosef, and then we'll go inside into the Torah. So there's a Mishnah, Daf Kuf Mem Hey, that says, Kol Sheba B'chamin Me'erev Shabbos, Shoynis B'cham B'Shabbos. That's something that was already cooked. It was Baba Chamin. It was cooked in hot water, Erev Shabbos, so you can soak it in Chamin on Shabbos. That means you could put it back into, say, a Kli Rishon. That's how we paskin. Put it into a Kli Rishon on Shabbos. So, from this Mishnah, it's seen that there is no din of bishul achar bishul. There's no problem of bishul achar bishul. That means something that was cooked out of Shabbos, you can recook it in certain ways, so to say, reheat it up on Shabbos. We have a Gemara, the Rosh brings. We have a Gemara in the Aflamates that says regarding the din of Hatmona. The Gemara says that one way may not be matmin. I mean, something that's a person has a pot. He wants to keep hot on Shabbos, so you can't wrap it in something that's not going to make it hotter, just to keep its heat. For example, take a hot pot of soup and wrap it in a blanket and towels. You cannot do that on Shabbos. And the reason is because we're worried, Shama Yartiach. The person may find that the pot is not hot. And so before he wraps it, we'll put it back on the fire. We'll reheat the pot and then wrap it. Because we're scared he may come to reheat the pot. So therefore, you cannot wrap it on Shabbos. From here, it seems that there is a problem of bishul achar bishul on Shabbos. So Rashi explains that the Rashi brings Taka, that Rashi explains that the problem with reheating that pot on Shabbos is because of bishul. The problem of reheating it will be that a person is going to be chayiv for bishul. So now the Rashi explains Shitas Rashi. This is all brought in Beis Yosef. Rashi explains Shitas Rashi that the difference between these two dinim is, we're going to explain that it depends what we're speaking about. If it's a davar which is yavish, that means a food which is dry, a solid food, so then one may, if it was cooked before Shabbos, one may reheat it on Shabbos, and there's no problem of bishul achar bishul. But if it's a liquid, something liquidy, malach, and it cooled off, like that, Gemara is saying the chashash is that it cooled off. So then if you reheat it on Shabbos, there's going to be a problem of bishul achar bishul. From bishul achar bishul, of reheating it on Shabbos. That's how the Rush explains Shitas Rashi. The Rush gives another alternative. In the Gemara of Daf Lametes, the Gemara that says we're worried that you're going to reheat it, but you're not allowed to wrap something on Shabbos because we're worried you're going to find that it cooled off and you're going to reheat it. Rash says that maybe you are actually not chayiv for bishul. The Gemara was concerned you're going to reheat the pot, so you may stoke the flames. You'll be chayiv mishum maver. The problem is not that you're going to recook the pot. Maybe there's actually no bishul achar bishul. But the problem is you're going to be chayav for lighting a fire. That's the problem. Since there's a problem of Shami Artiach, and for that you may be over on Mavir. So therefore, the Chacham said, do not reheat the pot on Shabbos, or do not wrap the pot on Shabbos. So that's another option in the Gemara, and that would also tell us that there is no stiro here in the Gemara. You're allowed to reheat something on Shabbos. That's what the Mishnah said. And there, and the previous Gemara, where the Mishnah was that's not through putting it in a hot pot. You're not putting it on the fire. The previous Gemara that said you're not allowed to wrap because you may reheat the pot. There, the Gemara was concerned for the Isra of Mavir, lighting a fire on Shabbos. Now, the Beis Yosef brings that there are opinions that agree with Rashi. The Beis Yosef brings, we have Rabbi Yerucham, the Smak. They both say even if something was totally cooked on Shabbos, you can if you reheat it on Shabbos after it cooled off, there'll be a problem of cooking, bishul achar bishul, and but the Rambam holds that there is no problem of bishul achar bishul, and so paskins the Rashba, and the Ran, they all hold from the Mishnah of Kol Sheba B'Chaman, the Mishnah of Kuf Memhei, that anything that was cooked already before Shabbos, there's no problem, no isser of cooking again. Once something was cooked, you can't cook it a second time. There's no re-bishul, no bishul achar bishul. The Rosh himself says that it would make sense that there is bishul achar bishul once something was cooled off. If you have something that was cooked before Shabbos and it cooled off, so then the Rosh discussed the way the Rosh says it is if it was cooked to Meichel ben Drusoy, so third cooked or half cooked, it has a status of something cooked, that's considered cooked. And if it cooled off and you reheat it, there would be a problem of bishul achar bishul. So it seems like in this prat, the Rosh is going with Shitas Rashi. Now, what would be the svar of the machlokes? What would be the svar of, let's take Rashi. Rashi's shita comes out according to the way the Rosh explained. So if we're speaking about a davar yavesh, something that's totally dry, or a solid food, so then there is no bishul achar bishul. Once it was cooked, there's no isser again for cooking it, for recooking. But if something was a liquid, so even if it was cooked, you can recook it again. There is a problem of bishul achar bishul. What would be the svar of that? So Achreinim explain that regarding a davar lach, the liquid, so once it cools off, you can't see anymore the bishul that's in it. It's not nicker, the bishul. In other words, the idea of bishul by Allah is heating it up. And once it cooled off, so it's so to say lost its bishul. The bishul totally left. You can't see the bishul that's in it anymore. And therefore, by a liquid, if you recook it, reheat it, that is considered cooking, because that is its definition of bishul. But by a davar yavesh, you cook something, now it's edible. So even if it cooled off, it's still a cooked item, that's still nicker, the bishul there, and therefore there's no problem of re-cooking it again. That is Shitas Rashi. The other Shitas will hold, the Rambam and so on, that by Allah also there's a difference once it was cooked. Like we know, we have there's this idea of distilled water. There is an idea, a difference in something that was cooked or not cooked. So therefore, they hold that even in a liquid, once it was cooked, so in bishul achar bishul. So that is one machlokes regarding this idea if there is bishul achar bishul. The Beis Yosef discusses a second idea, place where we have a machlekes of bishul achar bishul. Could we have come to Isser bishul if something was cooked already? And that is if something reached Michael ben Drusoi. Something was cooked up to Michael ben Drusoi, the food of a certain Robert that he used to cook it quickly. The idea of Michael ben Drusoi means it's already edible. It's not fully cooked. It's half cooked or whatever different shittas in that are. So if something's not fully cooked, even if it's cooked somewhat, maybe edible, is it a problem on Shabbos to take that a further step, cook it further? It's still hot. It's not an issue that it's not hot. Is it a problem to cook it further? And the Beis Yosef brings, again from Rashi, that would be a problem, according to Shittas Rashi. Because there's a couple Gemaras that you have a Gemara Daf Yud Ches that says that you have a pot that's hot, and there's a problem if someone were to be megis the pot, stir the pot, then they would be chayiv for bishul. So here again, what do you see? The way the Beis Yosef is explaining it. Daf Yud Ches speak about a pot, someone's actually dyeing wool. So the pot is hot. There's the dye is with the wool, and it's off the fire over there. Okay, but if you stir it, there would be a problem of bishul, of megis, and Beis Yosef brings another Gemara also about megis. And the simple understanding says the Beis Yosef, these are cases that already reached, so to say, a level of Michael ben Drusoi. It's already, the job was done to a certain extent. And adding in it, Rashi explains over there, that would be a problem of bishul. So you see, even though it reached a certain level of readiness, there is a problem in adding to the bishul. Because Rashi explains that Gemara that it's mishum bishul. The Rush says over here again, there is a possibility of learning it a different way. You could say that it's a problem of tzeveya, of dying through being megis, through stirring, or there could be a maybe it didn't reach Michael ben Drusoi. Again, there was another Gemara over there that the Rush brought from Beya of megis. But the Beis Yosef says that that's not the simple pshat. Simply, speaking in any case, even when it reached Michael ben Drusoi. So we have Shittas Rashi. Simply is even if it reached Michael ben Drusoi, the simple if you add to the bishul, it would be problematic. And but again, there's other ways of learning the Gemara that you do not have to say either it's not because of bishul or it didn't reach Michael ben Drusoi. Now here, so you have others that argue on Rashi. So here, the Rambam actually agrees to Rashi in this case that you could add in bishul, and obviously the Mishnah that said kol sheba b'chamin, if it was cooked before, you could put it in hot water again. Then we're going to say in Shittas Rashi is that there it was totally cooked. Something that's totally cooked. So in bishul achar bishul, if something's not totally cooked, so even though it already reached the stage of cooking, and if someone on Shabbos were to bring something that's raw to Michael ben Drusoi, would be considered bishul b'Shabbos, but because that is already a stage of cooking, it's considered cooked. But still, if it's not fully cooked, you can continue cooking. That's Rashi Shita, and the Rambam agrees in halacha to that. In Kol Sheba B'Cham, the Rambam may have a different shot, but in halachically, the Rambam agrees to that fully cooked, there's no bishul achar bishul. But if it's not fully cooked, even though it has a status of mivushal, and if someone were to bring it to that level, would be considered bishul. But if somebody else brings it further, it's weiter bishul. The Rashba is mekel. The Rashba holds that once it reached Michael ben Drusoi, since it has a status of cooked up halacha, so if you were to cook it further, there would not be an isser of bishul on Shabbos, like we learned earlier. Something that was cooked, like the Mishnah Kuf Memei, something that was cooked before Shabbos, there's no problem of cooking it on Shabbos once it has its status that it was cooked. So we have here two machlokes regarding bishul achar bishul. One is a davar lach, if something is a liquid and it cooled off, even if it was completely cooked earlier, but now it cooled off. Is there a problem of reheating? According to Rashi, Rabbeinu Yerucham, yes, there is bishul once it cooled off, but according to the Rambam, Rashba Ram, there's no problem. And once it's cooked, it's cooked. That's one machloikis. Second machloikis is that if you cooked something to a level of Michael ben Dusoy, it's already cooked previously to the level of Michael ben Dusoy. It's half cooked, it's edible. Halachically, it has a status of cooked, but it's not fully cooked. And you're going to bring it further to fully cooked, bring it closer to cook it more. Is there a problem of cooking on Shabbos? That's cooking after cooking. Bishul achar bishul. So again, according to Rashi, the way the Beis Yosef is mazber, that would be problematic. But, and the Rambam here agrees to Rashi halachically, but that's problematic. But the Rashba here holds that there would be no problem of cooking it further. Okay, now let's look inside. Let's do the Torah. So again, this is where the Sif Dalet would be. Again, it's not from the Torah, didn't split the Sifim, that's from Shulchan Aruch, but where it says where it would be Sif Dalet in the Torah. Afilu tafshel shenizbashel kvar, even if you have a tafshel that was already cooked, yesh boy mishum bishul, could still have by a din of bishul. Im nitztanin kvar, if it cooled off. So if it cooled off, you could recook it. It would have a din of bishul. Aval ba'udiriteach, but while it's still hot, loy, there is no problem of bishul. Something that's hot, and again, something that's cooked and it's hot, there's no isser of bishul by heating it. If it was not fully cooked, even though it reached the stage of the food of ben drusoy, and that is considered halachically cooked, but shayich by bishul, it's still possible to be mavashal it, afilu by dereteach, even if it's still hot. Even if it's still hot, here, that's the second din. If it's not fully cooked and you cook it further, that you'll be chayav, that there is bishul over here. Hani mili sheyesh bishul achar bishul b'tafshel sheyesh b'marak. When do we say that there is bishul achar bishul? That is, this is going back on the first case. This that we said is something cooled off. There is bishul achar bishul. That's a tafshel sheyesh b'marak that has in it liquid. It's a liquidy thing. Avol davar yavish, if something is solid, dry, solid, shen is bashal, which was cooked kfar, it was already cooked. Mutter the shoyse b'cham b'Shabbos. You're allowed to soak it in hot water on Shabbos. The Tanan, because we learned in the Mishnah, kol sheba b'cham mufnei Shabbos. Anything that was in hot water before Shabbos. Pirush. What does it mean it was in hot water before Shabbos? Shen is bashal kfar. It was cooked before Shabbos. And shoyri noisi b'chamin. You're allowed to soak it in hot water on Shabbos. Okay. Moiki Labatana Gilus to Rabba, speaking about the chicken from Rabba Abba, and his bashal cold sarka that was fully cooked before Shabbos, and it was dry. Okay, this is his opinion of that only something that was dry is okay, but if it was something that was wet, that cooled off, then you cannot reheat it on Shabbos. If it was not cooked before Shabbos, you cannot soak it in chametz on Shabbos. Okay, and then the Torah goes on. We're not going to finish the sif to other din. Okay, here are the two dinim of bishul achar bishul in the Torah. Now, the Beis Yosef discusses that we seemingly have over here, the Tor's father was a Rosh. A lot of times he's going with his father the Rosh, and also he wrote like a Kitzer, Piskei Dinei Rosh, and over there he brings the shit of the Rosh. But here, seemingly, he's not going like the Rosh. Why is that? So we mentioned earlier, the Rosh brings over here both discusses these Gemaras, brings shittas Rashi. So regarding the first machlokes, the Rosh said that even something was cooked to Michael ben Jesoi, if it cooled off, so then there is bishul. Brings Rashi, seems to be going with shittas Rashi. And that's what we'll say for the Beis Yosef. Now we're learning the Beis Yosef. So what seems like the way he learns the Rosh is that the Rosh would agree with this in Shittas Rashi, that even if you have something that was liquidy before Shabbos cooked, but if it cooled off, there is bishul to reheat it. But regarding the other din, something that is still hot, but it's not fully cooked, so there, the Rosh seems to be saying that there is no problem of bishul. Just read what the basic quoted Beis Yosef. Umistabra. It makes sense. The ad shlo higia leMichael ben Jesoi, if it did not reach Michael ben Jesoi, kol hamekarev bishuloi, whoever makes it is mekarev the bishul, brings it, does more bishul in it, more pullus of bishul, chayiv, then it'll be chayiv. But va'achar shehigia leMichael ben Jesoi, but once it reached Michael ben Jesoi, even it's danem. So if it cooled off, v'hir tichoi, and then he reheated, then chayiv, then you'll be chayiv. Could the Pirush Rashi? That's the first din. Gabi shami artiach. But go back a little before. He says, "But va'achar shel izbashel k'Michael ben Jesoi." But once it reached Michael ben Jesoi, efsher the ein bishul achar bishul. Then there is no bishul achar bishul. But the only case that there would be is if it cooled off. But if it would still be hot, then there is no bishul achar bishul. So here it seems to be saying that regarding the din of if it cooled off, there the Rosh agrees with Rashi. But regarding the din that when it's still hot, but it's not fully cooked, but it has it in bishul already because it reached Michael ben Jesoi, there we do not say bishul achar bishul. If someone would heat it further, cook it further, would not be a problem of bishul on Shabbos. This is seemingly the Rosh Hashita. And the Tur we just learned, paskin the both dinim like Rashi. So it seems that, so the Beis Yosef says, so in Ochanami, whatever the Rosh, when the Tur was bringing Shitas HaRosh, where we explain, so there he explains Shitas HaRosh, but the Tur in this din is arguing on the Rosh, explains why, because to say, it's the Gemaras are mashma, that even if it reached Michael ben Jesoi, the Gemaras that we quoted earlier regarding Megis stirring the pot, even if it reached Michael ben Jesoi, there would be a problem of bishul on Shabbos, and therefore the Torah paskin with this, in this, like Rashi, in the way the Beis Yosef learned Rashi. Okay, that is Shitas HaBeis Yosef. The Taz, we're gonna get soon to the Shulchan Aruch, read the Shulchan Aruch inside. Just in Shitas HaRosh, the Taz argues. The Taz holds that first he goes the same kav as the Beis Yosef. It seems to be saying that the Tur is arguing with the Rosh. And when the Taz says that, he even goes further. We mentioned here in the Beis Yosef that the Rosh argued only on one din of the Torah. There were two dinim here. You have a din of something that was fully cooked and cooled off. So if it's liquidy, then reheating it, you're going to be chayiv. There we said that the Rosh agrees with Rashi, right? He quotes Rashi. Seems so. The way the Beis Yosef learns, seemingly, the way Beis Yosef learns is that here he agrees with Rashi, and he argues only on the second din, something that's still hot. So over there, if you is something that's still hot, but not fully cooked. So there, if you cook it more, the Rush will hold that if already reached Ma'achar ben Desoy before, has a din of cooked, there's no problem of cooking more. And Rashi will hold that there is a problem of cooking. The Taz takes it even a step further. He says it seems like the Rush is arguing on Rashi on both din. Even though the Rush is quoting Rashi that if it's Nitztanen would be a problem, that a davar lach, something liquidy that cooled off would be a problem, even though the Rush quoted that, but the Rush said it. What did the Rush say? That after each Ma'achar ben Desoy, even it's done, then if it cooled off and you reheated it, you're chayiv. What if that's only if it reached Ma'achar ben Desoy? What if it's fully cooked? If it's fully cooked, there the Taz held. There the Taz holds in Shittas HaRush, at least in the beginning, that there, if it was fully cooked, even if it's a liquid and it cools off, there's no problem with bishul. This is when the Taz is going with the derech of the Beis Yosef, that the Rush is arguing, the Torah is arguing on the Rush, right? So he says that even if it's fully cooked, I'm sorry, the Torah held, even if it's fully cooked and cools off, then there's a problem with bishul. But the Rush holds, even if it's fully cooked, if it's fully cooked and cools off, then there's no bishul. When is there bishul? Only if it was cooked, but not fully cooked. It reached Ma'achar ben Desoy, and then cooled off. So this would come out that even though in general he agrees with Shittas Rashi, argues on the Rambam, that there is an idea of bishul achar bishul, so to say, on something that was cooked. Never argues with the Rashba. There is bishul achar bishul, something that was cooked. But he differentiates when in something liquidy that cooled off. But he differentiates, according to the Taz, he'll differentiate this thing that was cooked, this liquidy thing that was cooked. Was it fully cooked or just cooked, edible, but not fully cooked? So if it was edible, but not fully cooked, then there could still be a din of bishul if it cooled off and you reheated it. But if it was fully cooked, then there is, and it cooled off, there's no din bishul. So the Taz wants to say that the Rush will even argue on the tour regarding the first din. And if you learn the Pri Megadim, I'm not going to get into it now. It's a long Taz, so we're not going to do this Taz inside. Just give the basics of the Taz outside. If you look at the Pri Megadim, it says that in this way of the Taz, the Rush is even arguing, the Torah and Rush are even arguing with more ideas, even in a third Inyan, but we'll leave that at now. So this is how the Taz starts off, similar to the Beis Yosef, that there is a machlokes, the Torah and the Rush, regarding, first of all, something the Beis Yosef said clearly, that there's machlokes regarding something that's not fully cooked, still hot. Din number 2 in the Torah. Something that was cooked, but not fully cooked, still hot, could you cook it more? According to the Torah, it's also to cook it more, that's bishul. According to the Rush, there's no bishul in cooking it more. Then regarding the first din, even though the Rush agrees with Shittas Rashi, that there is an idea of bishul achar bishul, of a liquid that cooled off, still the Taz wants to say that he's not fully in agreement with Rashi. Because if it was fully cooked, then the Rush will say there's no bishul achar bishul. This, that there is bishul achar bishul, is only if it has a din of cooked, but it's not fully cooked. It's half cooked, it's edible, it's not fully cooked. Then if it cooled off, you reheat it, there's bishul. But if it's fully cooked, then there's no din bishul. But Rashi held, the way the Beis Yosef explained, even if it was fully cooked, there would be a din bishul. So we even have a second argument of the Rush and the Torah. But then the Taz goes on to say that the etzem, we can say that the Rush and Torah agree. The Torah told us that if you have something, let's start with the first din. But the first din, he says that even though the Rush said again that something that the first din something that's a liquid and it was cooked before Shabbos, and now it cooled off, and now you're reheating it. So even though the Rush's lashon was that it reached Michael ben Drusoi, but we can say that similar to what we said before in Beis Yosef, that in that there's no machlokes because he agrees that even if it was fully cooked and cooled off and you reheated it, it would be bishul. Use the expression because that's something that was already cooked. Already cooked, it cools off. Yes, mishum bishul. But even if it's fully cooked, we would still say there's a din bishul. If it cooled off, fully cooked, cooled off, and reheated. But then regarding the second din, he wants to say that over here also the Tur and the Rush would agree. Because this that the Tur said Yesh Mishum Bishul, the Tur did not say that you're chayiv. What did the Tur say? Loin is bashal called sarka, afin is bashal k'makam, so shayich by bishul. Shayich bishul. That didn't shayich by bishul, it's a derabbanan. And to the Issa derabbanan, the Rush would agree. The Rush would agree to that it's a derabbanan. The Rush was saying there's no chiyuv bishul, there's no deraisa. So according to the way the Taz wants to learn, in Shittas HaRush, is that the Tur and the Rush would come out that if something was a davar lach, something that was a liquid, cooked before Shabbos, fully cooked even, and cooled off, then there is a bishul to recook it. This is like Shittas Rashi. That's how the Torah paskins and so on, and the Rush would agree to that. And Pashtus Beis Yosef also holds like that in the Rush. In a case where something was not fully cooked, so here we have machlokes of Beis Yosef and the Taz. The Beis Yosef holds that according to the Rush, let's say first the Torah. According to the Torah, it's a bishul deraisa to cook it more, and according to the Rush, there's no isser bishul, even not midrabana, to cook it further once it has the status of bishul. But the Taz wants to say that that everyone is in agreement, the Torah and the Rush, that midrabanan there's no isser bishul. I'm sorry, midiraisa there's no isser bishul. Once it reached Michael B'Sai, there is an Isser Bishul to cook it for. Now, it seems like the Taz would hold halachically this whole Isser that's brought in Shulchan Aruch of cooking something that was already reached Michael Ben B'Sai, and to cook it further is only Isser D'Rabbanan. The Pashtus, Alter Rebbe, the Pashtus, we paskin that would be Isser D'Oraisa. Because the Taz is saying that's Shittas HaTur, even though it's not going to be necessarily Shittas Al-Rishonim, but saying the Mechaber brings it. Seems to, okay, Lav Dafki would hold that La'alacha because L'Poil, the Beis Yosef, didn't learn that way. So when the Mechaber brings it, he's, saying his pshat. Okay, it's a discussion itself, but halachically we wouldn't go that way. The Taz held that way, possibly, but halachically we would be pashut hold Tzisar D'Oraisa. Okay, now we're going to move over to the Shulchan Aruch. Okay, Siv Dalet. Okay, so that Taz we covered. It's the big Taz, the first big Taz, Siv Kat and Gimel. We're not going to go with it inside. We already did that discussion. Okay. Now Shulchan Aruch. Tav Shulchan is bashal. Again, Shin Yud Ches Dalet. Tav Shulchan is bashal called sarka. If you have a tavshel, a food item that was cooked totally, yesh boy mishum bishul. There is a din of bishul im nitzdanen if it cooled off. V'yesh oimrim ago. Here we have a Ramah. V'yesh oimrim dafke im nitzdamek v'yafala. Some say that this whole new chiddush here the Ramah is telling us that this din if that there's bishul, that's something that was cooked before Shabbos, and it cooled off. If you reheat it, there's bishul achar bishul, is only if it's mitztamik v'yafala. That means reheating it, heating it more, getting hot, and cooking is going to make the food better. But if, what Rama means to say, is that if it's mitztamik viraloi, that means it will be, by cooking more, it loses, cooks more, it's not getting burned, but getting dried out. It's not going to be good for the food to be cooked more. So then it's not going to be a problem of bishul achar bishul on Shabbos. That is what the Rambam. This is brought already this comes from Rishonim. It's brought already in the Beis Yosef, this idea that this is only speaking about mitztamik v'yafala. That some want to say that. Okay, well, we'll see soon more on that. So that's again, the Machaber did not bring that. It says most Rishonim don't seem to go with this way. Let's say it. They say there's bishul achar bishul. You reheat it. There's bishul achar bishul. Here we're saying that if there's a shita that holds Yeshayimrim, which seems like the Rambam wants to pass in that way because he's bringing us the Yeshayimrim, and he doesn't say not to go that way. That if it's mitztamik viraloi, if it gets worse through heating more, obviously it's getting warm, but the actual item will dry, it won't be so geshmak, so then there's no problem of bishul. Now we're going to go over to the second din of bishul, something that was not totally cooked. Even if it reached Michael ben Soy, that means it's considered mefushal, has a din bishul. Shayach boy bishul, it is shayach to have bishul. That means there is bishul to cook it more. Afilu ba'oidei reteach, even if it's still hot. That means you don't need it to cool off and reheat it. Something's boiling hot and not fully cooked. You're gonna do something to cook more than a shayach bishul. It's and like we said, according to the Taz, that seems to be only a din d'Rabbanan. That's how he learns in the Rosh, in the Tur. But the Beis Yosef learned that it's a din d'Oraisa. Pashut, that's the halacha. That's a din d'Oraisa. When do we say that? Sheyesh by bishul achar bishul betafshel sheyesh by marak. That is something that has liquid. This is going back to the first din. And it's something that cooled off and you're reheating. When is there bishul achar bishul? It's tashel sheyesh by marak. There's a liquid in there. It's something that was totally cooked and it is dry. Mutter you are allowed to soak it in hot water on Shabbos. Okay, we'll stop here. So again, davar yavish, that's totally cooked. You're allowed to reheat it on Shabbos. Now, regarding how you're allowed to reheat it, here we're discussing about putting it in a klivish, in something that's hot, but we're not discussing that it's on the fire. On the fire, this goes into a different separate sugya, not for today. The dinim of putting things chazara, putting things on the fire on Shabbos, that's a sugya of Reish and Gimel. This means heating it away, not on the fire, either putting it at distance from the fire, not directly on the fire, putting it in something that's a hot pot that's left the fire and something like that. Okay. Now, let's go back. We'll start with let's go to the Magen Avram's. We have things we still have to explain here, like we mentioned earlier. But we'll start with the Magen Avram's and we'll explain. So now we're going to learn inside Magen Avram Yud Aleph. Again, the first Taz we already spoke outside. We're not going to do any of that inside today. Okay. Yesh by Mishum Bishul Sivkat Yud Aleph Magen Avram. Again, this is something that was cooked, and we're saying even though it was fully cooked, if it cooled off, it's shayach bishul. Says it Magen Avram Babi Yedea. You should know Shkol dinim da asur mishum bishul. Anything that's asur for bishul. Filu litain alakira oitano koydem hesek asur k'mishkasati save simin reishon gimel. Okay, this is speaking about a case. Let's say you're going to have a goy that's going to come turn on the heat later. If it's cold, you're allowed to have a goy turn on the heat. So you're not allowed to put a pot if there's an Isser Bishul, you're not allowed to put a pot somewhere where the heat is going to go on later, and this will heat up the pot. If there's a problem of Bishul, that's also problematic. Okay, a side point. Now let's go to Sivkot and Yud Beis. This is a point that we need to learn. It's not because of Beis Yosef learned mashmali. Point number one, we said that if something was cooked before Shabbos and it's cooled off, so to reheat it on Shabbos is a problem of bishul. That's what the Mechaber told us. So now, what is considered something that cooled off? So over here, the Magen Avraham is bringing from the Beis Yosef that let's say you had something bubbling on the fire, and now you took it off the fire. It's not bubbling anymore, but it's still hot. So as long as it's Yad Seledis boy, many different opinions what is Yad Seledis boy, but as long as it's Yad Seledis boy, means literally the hand gets burned from it, put your finger in, it gets burned. Okay, the way we reckon it, Kreisei Shaltinoik, it's a child would get burned, his stomach would get burned from that water. Okay. Actually get into the din what exactly Yad Seledis, different opinions. You have to start, where do you start it at? General, is it 110, 17? Well, different opinions. But says the Beis Yosef, as long as it's Yad Seledis boy, it's still considered hot. It's not considered reheating now. Putting it back on the fire is not considered reheating it. That is, again, you're not allowed to put it back on the fire, but putting it closer to the fire, let's say, or whatever, putting it in a boiling pot that's off the fire, that's much hotter than it, so you're going to bring up its heat, that's not a problem of bishul on Shabbos. Is that Lashon Rabbeinu Yerucham? Lashon Rabbeinu Yerucham is in Mleinet Stamim. If it didn't cool off, even though it changed from its heat, not at the same level of heat, and now you're going to bring it to a higher level of heat, mutter, that is okay. That is point number one of the Magen Avraham. Now this that the Mechaber told us cooled off means it reached lower than the level of Yad Seledis. But Ayin Sif Tesvav Bagla. Here's a very important piece. We have to look at Sif Tesvav in the Hagla. What does the Ramos say in Sif Tes? So first he brings this idea. That a davar lach. Look, first speaking about a davar yavish. A davar yavish, it's okay to heat up. It says Ramah Haga, I feel it's standing for Aval Imurotech. If it's hot, I feel the davar she's been monocomuter. If it's still hot, then even something that has liquid you could heat, reheat higher, bring that heat higher. Something that was cooked and now the heat went down. You want to bring the heat higher. So if it's still hot, it's okay. Like we just learned in the Mechaber. Some people are mekel and they say, this is like we learned earlier, the Rambam, Rash Baran, Kol if you're not putting it directly on the fire, we mentioned earlier, you're not allowed to put something on the fire on Shabbos, even if there's no bishul. So even if it cooled off, mutter, you're allowed to reheat it if it was cooked before Shabbos. As long as you're not putting it directly on the fire, you're allowed to reheat it. Like that, that's the opinion, the second opinion. The sheet of the Rambam, the Rashba, that's something that was cooked before Shabbos and cooled off, you're allowed to reheat it on Shabbos. Says the Rambam, here's a punchline. What's the meaning? We know the Psak and Mechaber. Psak and Mechaber is no, it's awesome. It's bishul. Comes the Rambam says, "V'nagu lahakil bazeh." The minig is to be mekel. Im loy nitzdan legami. If it did not totally cool off, that if it did not totally cool off, even though it cooled off to an extent, and the thing the Rama says is it's a dayin, not over here, but earlier. It's roy lechel machmas. It's still possible to eat people would still eat it as a warm dish. Someone who wants to eat a warm dish, you have soup, still considered warm. It's not cold, even though it's not yatzilades. It cooled off below yatzilades. You're allowed to reheat it on Shabbos. It's a big chiddush, big cool of the Rama. You have a food, cooled off, not totally cool, but it's not yatzilades anymore. It's not considered hot halachically. But as long as people would still eat it, because it's still considered warm, people would still eat it as a warm dish. As a that is considered. There's no problem of bringing the heat higher on Shabbos. In bishul achar bishul. Big cool of Rama. We'll discuss this further later. So we have here Machloikis, the Machaber and Rama. Again, just the Machaber holds paskins totally like the first opinion, and the Machaber explains that only if you can only bring the heat higher, something that cooled off. If it's still yatzil like this way, still considered hot halachically, then you can bring the heat higher, even though it got a little cooler. It's still hot. The Rama holds as long as it's warm and a level that someone would eat it as a warm dish, you can reheat that on Shabbos. Be cool of the Rama. Okay, let's go weiter in the Magen Avram Sivkotim Yud Gimel. This is going on the Rama, that the Rama said there's a problem of bishul is yeshem dafke mitztamik v'yofelo. Only if it's good for the food to not just warm up, but it's not getting ruined by getting hot again, not drying out and getting whatever. It's good for the food to get it hotter. But if along with getting warmer, the quality of the food will go down, so that is not considered bishul b'Shabbos. Says the Magen Avram, va'bach pasak, the Bach paskins, kisvara rishon, like the first opinion. That means the Bach does not want to accept this opinion that mitztamik v'yafaloi, it needs to be mitztamik v'yafaloi, it needs to be getting better. If it gets worse, it's also bishul. This is a sugya for itself that has to do with leaving things on the fire on Shabbos, not regarding bishul. And the Bach says we don't find mitztamik v'yafaloi, mitztamik v'raloi regarding bishul, regarding cooking. If something's cold and you're bringing it to make it hot, that's cooking. I don't care if it makes the item shvacher by cooking it further. Look at Sivches. Over there, the Machaber also seems to bring such an idea. Here, the Machaber doesn't. But there he seems to bring. But there, the Magen Avram is discussing it. Why? I mean, it seems like the Machaber did not bring the second shita. That means he totally took on the first opinion that even if it's getting worse, dried out or whatever on the fire, or burnt or whatever, it's still bishul if you're reheating it. And over there, he does seem to bring a machlokes. The Magen Avram suggests here that possibly the Machaber here was relying on there. Also, Machaber is, so to say, leaning to that opinion that possibly Rama says, the Magen Avram says that you would not be over bishul, not if it's, so to say, not good for the food is drying out. Halachically, how we would paskin, the Alter Rebbe does not bring this idea. The Alter Rebbe just brings straight out this opinion that if you're something cooled off and you reheat it on Shabbos, there is a problem of bishul. So it would seem like the Alter Rebbe would hold in all situations there is a problem of bishul, like the Bach, and many achronim go that way. That would seem to be the opinion of the Alter Rebbe. The Taz wants to stick up for this opinion of the Rama. He wants to for the Bach. Again, that's in Taz Daled. We're not going to do that Taz inside either. We are running low on time, but he wants to go with the Bach. But like we mentioned, the Magen Avram is bringing the Bach, and the Alter Rebbe seems to paskin that way, that it will, according to this opinion, will be a problem to reheat something on Shabbos, even if it's drying out and so on. Okay. One more Magen Avram we have. This is going on a Davar Yavish. The Machaber said Davar is a Bashal Kfar Yavish. mutar l'sheitze b'cham b'Shabbos. Right, so Daviyavish, you're allowed to soak that was cooked previously. You're allowed to soak in hot water on Shabbos. It says the Magen Avram mafil b'kli rishon. You can put it in a boiling hot pot of a kli rishon that was on the fire. Which causes siftaz vav the bishul achar bishul, because there is no problem of recooking something that's yavish. The Bach wants to say you cannot put it in a kli rishon. You can only reheat it in a kli sheni, and the Magen Avram is disagreeing. Mashma lashon hashulchan aruch. The loinetz bashul. Shabbos, also the Shabbos. Another thing that it looks like from the Shulchan Aruch is saying Davar is bashal kvar. You're allowed to put it in hot water on Shabbos. What about something that's soaked in hot water before Shabbos? And now I'm only soaking it again in hot water on Shabbos. I'm not putting it on fire. It wasn't on the fire before. I'm not putting it. Didn't fully cook before Shabbos. But now I'm not going to put it on the fire. Just want to put it in hot water. It's not going to cook more. That's the Rambam. The Beis Yosef brings from the Rambam that it should be okay. But here you see the Mechaber does not hold that way, because the Mechaber says davar sheniz bashal kfar. If it was fully cooked, v'hu yavish, and it's dry, davar sheniz bashal kfar, seemingly cooked, not just soaked in hot water. So again, if something was put in hot water before Shabbos, but wasn't fully cooked, could you re-put it in hot water now on Shabbos? You're not going to fully cook it either. Will it bring it further? The Lashon of Shulchan Aruch is mashma that it's problematic. You cannot put it in hot water. We would be worried that that would bring it to further cook. And says in Magen Avram, we should be machmer if this pot of water is hot, to not put it in that pot unless it was fully cooked before Shabbos. Okay. Now we have some halacha l'maisa we want to learn. Some things to bring out. First of all, we want to discuss this opinion of the Ramah. The Ramah over here, again, which we brought from Siftaz Vav, and what the Ramah says in Rishon Gimel, this idea that you have something that was cooked before Shabbos, and you are it cooled off, but it's still warm, cooled off. You took it off the fire and it's cooled off, and now it's still warm. Or I'm sorry, if it cooled off, the Mechaber said it's a problem. If you reheat it, Mechaber Paskin, like Shittas Rashi, it's a problem. Bishul Shabbos. Comes the Ramah says, if it's still warm and people would be able to eat it as a hot dish, as a warm dish, wouldn't be considered cold. So then, Adayin Nechel Machmas Cham Musoi, then you can reheat it on Shabbos. So the question here in the Ramah needs to be explained. What's pshat? If it's not anymore Yatzei Ledes boy, it does not have the din of something hot. If it's not Yatzei Ledes boy, it's not considered hot halachically. So halachically it's considered cold. So what's this svara that since it's still warm, people can still eat it, you can reheat it. If someone were to take something, and a person's allowed to warm up something on Shabbos if he's not bringing it to Yatzei Ledes, but he has to make sure he puts it in a place that can never reach Yatzei Ledes. But let's say a person has something that's cold, and he's going to put it distant from the fire, but he'll warm it up. You're allowed to do that on Shabbos. It's not considered heat. It's not considered hot. It's not considered cooking. Now, there's no question if someone brought something to be from cold to warm, now it's warm. You can't say, oh, now that it's warm, I could bring it from warm to hot. That's for sure also on Shabbos. That's for sure also. But here the Ramah says it was hot. It didn't totally cool off. Still warm. Here I can bring it to make it hot. What's this far over here? Why should that be allowed? So this is a machlokes achreinim how to learn pshat in this Ramah. And same thing, the machlokes how to learn pshat in Baal Torah. There are those that want to learn in the Ramah. That the Ramah is really paskening like the second opinion, like the Rambam, like the Rashba. That's something that cooled off on Shabbos. You're allowed to reheat on Shabbos. Just the minhag is to be machmer if it totally cooled off. If it's a little warm, there they're making. It's only a minhag to be machmer for the first opinion. That we so to say that we're worried for something that cooled off to reheat it, and the minhag only was worried if it totally cooled off. But if it's still a little bit warm, then we don't have to be makel. If we learn that way, it's nice pshat in the Ramah, it's a minute, it's a chumrah, and this would mean that really we're paskening that ain bishul achar bishul, even something that cooled off, not like the mechaber, even something that cooled off, there's no bishul achar bishul. But others learn that no, the Ramah is paskening like the first opinion, that there is bishul achar bishul when it cools off. So therefore, if it cooled off totally and you reheated it, you are chayiv for bishul, like Rashi. But he only says that if it totally cooled off. It doesn't need to still be yatzilaz, but if it's still warm, there's no bishul achar bishul. Now, what would be the svar? For that, different svars are given. So one of the svars given, it's brought in a few places already, such an idea, but is that kol zaman, it's still warm, so the bishul didn't leave it yet. Something cooled off totally, so the bishul left. Kol zaman, it's still warm, even though it doesn't have a geder of hat halachically, but the bishul is still there. The bishul in it is still nicker. If it was cold and you brought it to warm, it's not the bishul, it's not the original bishul, it's in the warmth. So then for sure it's us to bring it higher to yatzid lettuce. But if the bishul, if the warmth is still there and it still can be eaten as a warm dish, so the bishul is still nicker in it. The bishul didn't totally leave, and therefore you could reheat it on Shabbos. But according to this opinion, if it would be if it would be cooled off totally, then it's an itzer deraisa to reheat it. You're chayv mishum bishul. There's an afkiminus halacha brat. How I'm going to learn the Rama? Is it really mutter? Something that cooled off totally. Really, it's mutter. It's only the minig. So if you only macham inside the minig, so certain places maybe there could be coolers. But if you hold it's itzer deraisa, so then it would. We're not going to get into it now, but there would be an afkiminus halacha. Now the Alter Rebbe. Also, there's a machlekes. How do Lamshan and Alter Rebbe? The Alter Rebbe brings this Ramah. He brings the two opinions. He brings the Siftes. Brings opinion number one. Then he brings the Yashomer, Filin Tzal Lagamri, and Bishul Achar Bishul. So first, he brings the first opinion. And the Alter Rebbe says over there, "Cham kol kach," it cooled off, but he says, "I feel like it cooled off, and it's yeah." Let's see the beginning of the halach. Kol davar lach. This is shin yud ches halacha tes and Alter Rebbe. Kol davar lach. Yesh bein bishul achar bishul. Davar lach has bishul achar bishul. Then a tafshel lach shen is bashul. You have a tafshel lach that cooked. Called tzarkoi. When it's done and it cooled off, I feel when it's done legamri. Sheni yatzid this boy. Even if it's not totally cold, but any yatzid this boy, it's not very hot. You know, your finger doesn't get burnt. Chim by Shabbos, and you reheat it on Shabbos at Yatzid Lettuce Boy. It's chayv mishum bashul. But if it's cham kol kach at Yatzid Lettuce Boy, maticha yoser. If it is Yatzid Lettuce, you bring the heat higher, so there's no bishul. Okay. The go weiter brings v'yeshem. Some people, this is the second opinion. I feel that it's done legami, even if it totally cooled off. Ein bishul achar bishul. There's no bishul achar bishul. Umutar la'aticha b'Shabbos, and you're allowed to heat it up, like the Alter Rebbe says. Weiter. And he brings a minig. The minig is to be mekel. It's down in the camera. If it didn't totally cool off, but it could be still eaten because of its heat. Even it's down in the camera, or if it totally cooled off, then we act like the first opinion. I feel in diavad, even for the Yevet situation, it's bar b'simin min reish nun gimel. Okay, that means that you're not going to be able to eat that food if it was reheated. So here you have the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe is bringing the Ramah that minig is that if it's still a little bit hot, but edible as a hot dish, so to say, you're allowed to eat it. You're allowed to warm it up higher. You're allowed to heat it up. But if it's a sound legamri, then you're not allowed to. So someone will learn Pshat and Alter Rebbe. But Alter Rebbe is really passing like the second opinion. This is how Rav Chaim Noah learns. You really passing like the second opinion. Just the minig is to be more machmir. Why? Because Alter Rebbe says in Nitzdan legamri noyagin kisvar rishona. If it totally cooled off, we're noyeg his Svar Rishona. We act like the Svar Rishona. That is how some learn. But many do not learn the Alter Rebbe that way. They want to learn that Alter Rebbe holds like beikir, like the first opinion, that there is bishul achar bishul. But kol zman, it's still warm. There's no bishul achar bishul. And they bring the Alter Rebbe is quoting, like he says in Rishon Gimel, and there in Sifchaf Hey, the Alter Rebbe says regarding goy heating it up. So the Alter Rebbe says that even though if a yid would take this food that totally cooled off and reheated it, it would be a chiyuv chatas. So it seems like there is a total over there a chiyuv chatas. It's not only a minute. Alter Rebbe is telling you if a yid did it, it would be a chiyuv chatas. That means it's also minater, like the first opinion. There's total bishul. There's other diyukim, and that's how my father paskined. That's how he writes in the Sefer, that if something cooled off totally, there is bishul achar bishul. There is a problem bishul achar bishul. That is one idea. So some more. We're going to finish off soon. Just a couple of things. Halacha l'maisa. Again, this beer of in the Ramah that we said that as long as it's still around, it's as long as it's still warm, it could be eaten. So then you could reheat it, even though if it totally cooled off, it's Isser Deraisa. But here it's still the bishul still there, so it's not the bishul didn't totally leave. Tila l'David says that beyond the Ramah. Okay. Anyways, we mentioned before something that was learning is bashal lagamri is shayach by bishul, right? Something that was cooked, still hot, but not totally cooked. So there's a problem if you cook it more. There's a isser of bishul. That's the Chaber Paskin that way. Alter Rebbe also says that in Sifyud, Kol Zesh b'tafshel shenis bashal called tzarkei. This is only a tafshel that was totally cooked. Kol shel is bashal called tzarkei. If something wasn't totally cooked, afilun is bashal k'bar k'maycham b'desoy. Even if for each maycham b'desoy, yesh by mishum bishul. You bring it further, there is bishul. This is how the Beis Yosef learned in Shittas Rashi that there is a problem with bishul. Afilu by direteach, even if it's still hot. That the Rambam paskins that way. This is not like the Rashba. Afilu, okay. So anyway, if you're gonna bring the bishul further, there's bishul. So just a couple things to keep in mind. If someone took a pot from the fire, and he now wants to bring the pot, put it back on the fire, even if he's still holding it, everything, if not everything is totally cooked, taking cholent on a Friday night, if it's not totally cooked, you can't put it back. Even if parts of the cholent are cooked and then other things are not, can't put it back on the fire. Another example, it's in the beginning of Shabbos and you're moving around the pots on the blech. If not everything is cooked, if you're going to move a pot closer to the fire, you're doing a pa'ula to make that cooking happen quicker. It's a problem of being mekarev the bishul. If there's pots that are not totally cooked, putting a lid on a pot that's not totally cooked. If someone took something out of the oven and there's more stuff in the oven, okay, the oven's a separate sugi if you could have, but let's say people have things in the oven on Shabbos, and if there's more things in the oven, if something there's not totally cooked, you can't close the door. It's just bringing ideas, the halacha, that something that's not totally cooked, you can't cook it more. It's some practical things. Moving pots on a blech. Maybe people don't, now it's something we have to keep in mind. If it's not totally cooked, you can't bring that pot closer to the fire. Just some ideas in that. Regarding water, what's considered totally cooked? This is a machlekes. Some want to say when the water is already reached yad sela this boy, the water reached that it's hot, like we mentioned earlier. You put your finger in, so you can't hold it in. You have to take it out. Or the way we reckon is cases shel tinik, a child's stomach gets burned. It's 110, 70, whatever that range. There's many shittas in that. What's exactly level is the outside like this. So that's considered totally cooked. And then to cook it further, heat it more is not a problem. It's Menachronim that hold that way. Moshe holds that way. Others hold that no. Water fully cooked is only when it reached a boil. But a kol zman didn't reach a boil, even though it's very hot before Shabbos. You cannot do something to make the water reach a boil. This is a machlokes. Rabbi Farkash is makel on this. So my father wrote in the Sefer to be machmer. Rabbi Farkash says it's considered totally cooked and so on. My father says to be machmer, but he says for a different reason, not to bring out water to a boil, something that didn't boil before, because since there's many different opinions in Yatsi Ledes, so even if we're machmer, that something is bringing something to 110, some people even say less, sheet of 104, it's a problem with Yatsi Ledes. You can bring something to warm, but don't bring it. But there's opinions that hold Yatsi Ledes is much, much, much more. So according to the opinions that say Yatsi Ledes a much higher degree, so even if you think it's Yatsi Ledes, but maybe there's an opinion that holds it's not Yatsi Ledes. So then bringing it to a boil, could be taking something that's from not Yatsi Ledes to Yatsi Ledes. So here my father wanted to say, better to be machmer. Something just to think about. There are the samovars on Shabbos that have the tube outside of the samovar that tells you the level of the water. A lot of these have achar. So speak about even one that has a hechsher. The level in the water in the samovar is hotter, obviously, than the one that's in that tube. So when you're going to take water out, you're going to take that water, the water is going to go down, and some of that maybe will end up in your cup, but some of it may end up in the samovar. So you're heating that water more on Shabbos. So now, this is discussed a lot. I mean, they say, the companies that make it say that it's definitely Yatsi Ledes in that tube is Yatsi Ledes. So it's not a problem. That's what they want to say. But if we're going to discuss the issue of that making something hotter, so that could be possibly a problem. I actually called one of these companies that have a hechsher, started asking them. They said in such a situation, they discussed with the poskim, everyone would agree, okay, it's okay. My understanding at the time, the guy didn't really explain to me, but my understanding of the time was because no one has kavana on heating up that water. So we're not going to be machmer for those opinions and the things that, therefore, all the rabbanim are going to be makel over here. And when I asked my father, he also said, I wasn't speaking about that water in the tube. He didn't want to get into that, but he said that's a different story. So again, in the water, it's something to think about. Again, the ones that have a hechsher, hopefully they're doing it well. But they want to say that it's definitely Yatsi Ledes, and therefore, and here everyone would agree to take water from there, and we don't have a problem of the water mixing with the water in the samovar of making it hotter. I do want to mention something that we can do to make the water in the side tube hotter is that if, and Rabbi Farkash brings this, even though he's makel, like I mentioned, but someone does want to be machmer, what we can do is if you cover, the reason why, one of the reasons why the water out of the samovar in that tube is cooler is because there's a place for the water to go out on top, the ear, to go out. But if you cover that thing, that little hole on top of that tube, so the water in that tube will get hotter. Right? It will not be the level of samovar, but will be hotter. Maybe that can help with taking water out. If someone wants to, that's an idea that we can do. Okay, one more Indian to discuss in La Halacha is we mentioned that a Dover Yavish, second halacha, something that was second halacha, third point. So something that was totally cooked before Shabbos, and it's Yavish. Then there's no problem with bishul. Bishul, you can heat that up on Shabbos. Or if not mutter, like we discussed earlier, there's tnoim, but you can put it in a haklidishin, something that was totally cooked before Shabbos. You can put a haklidishin on Shabbos. So what is considered yavish? There are achronim that want to learn that yavish means that it's not. It doesn't have to mean that it's totally dry, as long as it's mainly a gush. It's mainly yavish. It's mainly a solid, not much liquid, and that is something that we do not have to worry about bishul achar bishul. Once it was fully cooked before Shabbos, you can reheat that on Shabbos. But from the Alter Rebbe, it doesn't seem like he learns that way. The Ram Chaim Noah explains that. Alter Rebbe, Sifir Aleph, Shinit Ches, says Tafshel Yavish Ein B'Reitiv Klal, a dry tafshel that does not have any reitiv at all, is no liquid, Ein bishul achar bishul. And like the Ram Chaim Noah says, Ein reitiv klal, it's totally dry. He says Ein bishul lachluchis, Ein bishul lachluchis, some that there is no wetness there. It has to be totally dry. That's what he wants to learn about the Rebbe. He has a discussion. What does it mean? Totally dry has no wetness. He says it's totally dry. You don't feel anything wet. He says possibly it could be mekel. It doesn't say about those, but he says possibly it could be mekel until it's tefiach hamlas latfiach. It means if you were to touch whatever the food is, it's wet, it makes your hands wet. If your hand would touch something else, touch your other hand, and the other hand, the wetness transfers over, that would be considered wet. So possibly it could be made until such a level of wetness. But if you would touch it, and some wetness went on your hand, but you wouldn't transfer anywhere, it's possible to say that that's still considered dry. Akapanim, the Alter Rebbe learns that it needs to be totally dry, like we said. At least not tefiach hamlas latfiach. Then one more nakuda about this. In Shulchan Aruch, the Alter Rebbe says that mutter, the same Sifir Aleph, the next line, and we'll start again from the beginning. Tafshel Yav B'Reitiv Klal and Bishul Achar Bishul. This bashak pap was cooked already called sarkoi. Afilu nitztal lagam, even though it totally cooled off. Mutter l'shreis, afilu l'shreis b'klidishin eitech. You could even soak it in a klidishin which is hot. Kedei sheyehei nemoyach sham, that should melt there. Be a davalach and it will come lach. So the Rebbe here is passing, like the Magen Avraham, that if you have something that is right now a yavish, it has gel, a chicken, tzar could have a little bit of liquid, the gravy could turn into a gel. There's a little bit of this on the chicken, it's all yavish. If you're going to warm it up, that will be nimayach, it will melt. Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch says that's considered a yavish. If it's wet, when you touch it, when it's cold, touch it, it's wet, it's a problem. If it's dry, it doesn't have wetness. And when you cook it, it'll melt, it'll come out, wetness will come out, and so on. That's okay. That's what the Alter Rebbe says in Shulchan Aruch, and that's the Magen Avraham paskins that later in Siftei Zayin. But in Siddur, the Alter Rebbe says not to rely on that. The Alter Rebbe says the end of Hilchos Shabbata. Afa pishem bishul achar bishul v'dav yavish mikomakim choyze v'nimcha menu k'tzaz yesh be'em mishum bishul achar bishul l'achluchas ha'machri im hayad zeled is bod. The Alter Rebbe says that if it's choyze v'nimcha, this davar yavish it melts, it dissolves, it becomes into a liquid. Not dissolves, it turns into a liquid. So then there is bishul achar bishul in that little liquidy the little liquid that came out. Alter says you have to be very careful not to take meat or chicken that was cooked or roasted and not to reheat them. If there'll be some gravy that will come out and will turn into come out to let us, you can't do that. And Alter says Mishum Iser Skila v'Chakaras Chavashal. Things Alter is Choishish Pashat being over Bishul Deraisa is a Skila and Karas. So Alter here went with Shittas Alavush. The Magen Avraham and Siftei Zayin argues on Alavush. Alter and Shulchan Aruch passing like the Magen Avraham. If it melts, it's considered still Yavish. It started off as Yavish. You started off heating it. But in Siddur, Alter Rebbe is Chayzer on this prat and says that if something melts from it, it turns into a lach, and in that lach, if it recooks, it's considered bishul Shabbos. So again, 2 points. Number one, yavish has to be totally dry. That Alter Rebbe says even in Shulchan Aruch. And number two, and then you're allowed to cook it on Shabbos. Number two is something that when you cook it, totally dry, like a challah, it's totally dry. Some schnitzel could be totally dry, but if there's liquid, a kugel, you have to check. It could be there's wetness. Okay, maybe you need that should be tefach like we mentioned earlier. But it could be it's dry. Could be you have to. But that's point number one. That's to be totally dry. Point number two. And Shulchan Aruch holds if right now it's dry, even though after I'm going to warm it up there'll be wetness, that's still okay. But in Siddur he holds that no, that wetness that comes out once we warm it up, that has it in lach, and if you cook it, it has a problem of bishul b'Shabbos if that reheats. Okay, that ends our share for today.